Welcome back. We're picking up where we left off. Today, we are mapping out chapters 28 through 37 in our deep dive, and we have a very specific sequence to cover.
Right. Well, we'll start with chapter 28. This is an independent wisdom poem, and it focuses on ancient mining and the absolute limits of human knowledge.
Yeah, and then second, we'll move into chapters 29 through 31. So this constitutes Job's formal closing statement. We'll look at his memory of his former life and his present physical and social degradation.
Exactly. And then we will analyze his extensive oath of innocence. Third, we turn to chapters 32 through 37.
Which is where we encounter the arrival of Elihu, right?
Yes. So we'll discuss his theological arguments and also examine the scholarly debate regarding his insertion into the text.
And finally, we will close with a Latter-day Saint devotional section. We're going to connect Job's unrewarded integrity to themes of trust and consecration.
But before we get to the structural analysis, we really need to establish the physical and cultural realities of the ancient Near Eastern world. I mean, the text relies on specific, concrete details of this society.
Right, we are looking at an ancient world capable of industrial-scale human intervention.
Yeah, this is not just a primitive agrarian society. Men are conducting mining operations far from any human habitation. They cut shafts deep into the earth.
The text actually describes them hanging suspended in the darkness by ropes, swinging back and forth far from the paths traveled by ordinary people.
Yes, they literally overturn mountains by the roots. It is a massive physical undertaking. The text details men binding up streams.
So they block underground water sources.
Exactly. They do this to keep water from trickling into the mine shafts and flooding their work. And they search out iron, copper, silver, gold, and sapphire.
Operating in completely dark, hidden places. The text says no bird of prey has ever seen these places.
Right, the falcon's eye has not spotted these depths. The proud lion has never walked there. Men extract these hidden things and bring them into the light.
And that physical environment of the mine contrasts sharply with the civic environment of the city. Above ground, the political epicenter of this society is the city gate.
You really have to understand this was not merely an entrance through a wall. The gate was an architectural complex. It was the functional courthouse of an ancient Near Eastern town.
It provided shade and seating, right?
Yes, and recognized elders sat in the gate to hear legal disputes. They functioned as judges. They witnessed contracts and land transfers.
And when they judged cases, they didn't just offer advice, they acted with physical force. Job describes breaking the jaws of the wicked.
He describes plucking the prey from their teeth. This is vivid, forceful intervention.
And the social hierarchy in this space was strict, wasn't it?
It was absolute. When a recognized elder approached, young men immediately stepped aside. They hid themselves.
The aged rose to their feet and stood out of respect. Princes and nobles stopped talking, holding their tongues in the presence of an honored judge.
But that hierarchy created severe margins in this society. A base, nameless people lived entirely outside that structured community.
Driven out by want and famine.
Yeah, they gnawed the dry ground in the wasteland. They dwelt in the cliffs of valleys, in caves, and among the bushes.
Literally flogged out of the land by the settled community.
Exactly. In the strict hierarchy of this world, these outcasts ranked at the very bottom. They ranked lower than the working animals. They were considered beneath the dogs that guarded a flock.
Wow. We also need to understand the religious landscape of this region. The text points to pervasive cultural temptations. Astral worship was a specific, constant lure.
Men looked up and were enticed by the brightness of the sun. They watched the moon walking in splendor.
And in response, they secretly kissed their hands in veneration to the sky. This was a widespread practice in surrounding cultures.
And it was a direct threat to the strict monotheism Job claims. Beyond daily religious practices, there was the legal religious landscape of death.
Specifically in surrounding cultures like Egypt, right?
Right. The deceased faced a highly structured tribunal in the afterlife. To pass into the next life, a person had to systematically deny a long, specific list of sins before divine judges.
So this culture was heavily structured by formal oaths and conditional curses. It demanded rigid legal accounting.
Which is exactly the legal framework you will see appear later in Job's final speech.
That brings us to the structural state of the text as we enter chapter 28. The previous dialogue has completely collapsed.
The cycle of speeches is broken. Bildad's third speech shrank to a mere 6 verses. Zophar failed to speak a third time at all.
And Job closed the dialogue proper in chapter 27 with an oath holding fast to his integrity. The friends have exhausted their retributive theology. They have run out of arguments.
This collapse forces us to ask specific analytical questions about this middle stretch of the book. What function does an independent wisdom poem serve right here?
How does Job formalize his legal demand for a hearing?
And what structural role does Elihu play before the final theophany? So let us begin with chapter 28. This chapter is a self-contained poem.
It contains the most technically detailed material in the entire book, describing ancient mining with first-hand specificity.
The poem opens by cataloging human ingenuity. It expresses clear admiration for industrial-scale human intervention into the natural world. It proves humans can locate and extract hidden material treasures.
Men put an end to darkness. They search out the farthest limit for the ore in gloom and deep shadow. The text details the copper smelted from the stone.
It describes the earth from which bread comes, while underneath it is turned up as by fire.
That refers to fire setting, doesn't it?
Yes, ancient miners would build fires against the rock face to heat it, then they would dash cold water against the heated rock to fracture it. This is advanced, dangerous engineering.
Humans are mastering the physical elements. They are extracting wealth from the bedrock of the earth.
The poem celebrates this mastery. It acknowledges the immense skill required to navigate the subterranean darkness.
But then the poem executes a sharp structural pivot. After cataloging human technological dominance, it asks a central question. Where shall wisdom be found, and where is the place of understanding?
And the text provides immediate categorical answers. Man does not know its value. Wisdom cannot be found in the land of the living.
The deep says it is not in me. The sea says it is not with me.
The text insists wisdom cannot be purchased. It cannot be bought with solid gold. It cannot be weighed out in silver. Onyx and sapphire cannot equal it.
Glass and gold cannot be exchanged for it. Coral and crystal are not even worth mentioning. The price of wisdom is above pearls, and the topaz of Ethiopia cannot equal it.
The contrast with the mining imagery drives the point home. You can mine gold. You can mine iron. You can dig a shaft and pull sapphire out of the dirt.
But wisdom cannot be mined. Human ingenuity cannot extract it from the earth. No matter how deep you dig, you will not strike a vein of understanding.
So the poem delivers a compact answer to its own question. God alone understands the way to wisdom. God alone knows its place.
He looks to the ends of the earth. He sees everything under the heavens.
God alone saw wisdom when he established the foundations of the world. He saw it when he gave the wind its weight and apportioned the waters by measure. He saw it when he made a decree for the rain.
The summary verdict at the very end defines wisdom precisely. The fear of the Lord, that is wisdom. To depart from evil is understanding.
That is the only access point humans have to this cosmic order. Now, the authorship and structural function of this poem raise important compositional questions.
Because there is no speech heading assigning these words to Job, every other chapter in the dialogue section clearly identifies the speaker. This one does not.
It sits unanchored between Job's previous speech and his final legal demand. Scholars like Norman Habel and David Kleins treat this chapter as an independent wisdom poem.
They argue an editor likely inserted it at this exact structural point.
Right, it functions as an interlude. The pause serves a specific purpose for the reader. The poetry steps back from the raw, personal anguish of the preceding chapters.
The dialogue between Job and his friends was heated. It was accusatory.
And this poem cools the temperature. It reflects meditatively on the absolute limits of human knowledge, and this placement undercuts the confidence of both Job and the three friends.
The friends have argued exactly how God's justice works. They have mapped it out perfectly. They believe sin leads directly to suffering and righteousness leads directly to prosperity.
Job has argued the opposite. He claims God is acting unjustly. But both sides speak with absolute certainty about the mechanics of divine justice.
And the poem argues their certainty is misplaced. The moral structure of the universe is not something humans can solve through argument. Divine governance is not accessible to human reasoning.
You cannot map it. You cannot dig for it. You cannot buy it. It belongs entirely to God. The poem acts as a theological corrective to the entire preceding debate.
Which raises a critical question for you as the listener. If wisdom about divine governance is totally beyond human reach, does this chapter render Job's upcoming legal demands entirely pointless?
The poem explicitly states, humans cannot locate understanding. Yet Job is about to spend 3 chapters demanding a formal legal hearing from God. This creates a distinct narrative tension.
Job is attempting a legal maneuver the text just told us cannot succeed.
Exactly. The text has declared human limitations, and Job is about to push against those exact limitations. He refuses to accept the boundary. He demands access to the divine counsel.
That tension remains present as we enter chapter 29. This marks the beginning of Job's closing statement. Chapter 29 is an extended, nostalgic recollection.
It lacks argument. Job simply remembers his life before the collapse. He wishes to be as in the months of old when God watched over him.
Job mentions his former wealth, but he emphasizes his social role. He focuses on his public life.
Job was a respected communal judge and elder. His status did not come merely from his flocks or his lands. His status came from moral authority, and he earned that authority through specific civic actions.
We see this action at the city gate. Job describes taking his seat in the square. He delivered the poor who cried out. He helped the fatherless who had no one to assist them.
The blessing of the wretched came upon him. He made the widow's heart sing for joy. He put on righteousness, and it clothed him. Justice was his robe and his turban.
He describes himself as eyes to the blind. He was feet to the lame. He was a father to the needy. He actively searched out the cause of strangers.
This was not passive righteousness. He did not sit in his house and simply avoid sin. He went to the gate and engaged in the messy reality of civic justice.
I note the specific physical imagery Job uses here. He says he broke the fangs of the unrighteous. He made them drop their prey from their teeth.
That is forceful intervention.
It is. He describes the wicked as predators and the vulnerable as prey. He stepped between them. He actively destroyed the mechanisms of exploitation in his community.
This specific record of behavior connects directly back to chapter 22. We must recall Eliphaz's fabricated list of sins.
Right. Eliphaz accused Job of stripping the naked of their clothing. He accused Job of giving no water to the weary and sending widows away empty.
Eliphaz based these accusations purely on his theological necessity. His theology required Job to be guilty of abusing the vulnerable. If Job was suffering, Job must have sinned.
But chapter 29 provides Job's detailed record of the exact opposite behavior. The contrast is sharp. Job protected the widows, he defended the orphans.
He earned the absolute deference of the community. People waited for his counsel like they waited for the rain. They opened their mouths for his words like they opened for the spring rain. He smiled on them when they had no confidence.
That memory of established authority sets up the devastating social inversion of chapter 30. The chapter opens with a pivotal phrase, but now.
The memory of chapter 29 is completely severed from the present reality. The transition is violent.
Job is now mocked by the youngest and most marginal men. He measures this distance with a specific, concrete detail from his own estate. These are men whose fathers Job would have disdained to set with the dogs of his flock.
That is a harsh assessment. It shows the rigid hierarchy of his world. The social inversion is absolute.
The men who previously gnawed the dry ground now mock him.
The men who were driven from the community now make Job their song. They abhor him. They keep their distance from him. They do not hesitate to spit at the sight of him. Job has fallen beneath the people who were flogged out of the land.
The text then moves from social humiliation to visceral physical suffering. Job describes his body deteriorating, his skin turns black and falls from him.
His bones burn with heat. His harp turns to mourning. His flute turns to the voice of those who weep. His bowels boil and rest not. Days of affliction confront him.
Notice how the poet alternates constantly between the social rejection and the bodily deterioration. The text refuses to let the reader settle into one register.
You read about the mocking outcasts. Then you read about his blackened skin. You read about the loss of honor. Then you read about the burning in his bones. The suffering is total. It encompasses his physical body and his social identity.
The closing of chapter 30 reaches a profound depth of despair. Job hits his lowest point since chapter 3. He cries out to God, and God does not answer. He stands up, and God only looks at him.
Job states, God has become cruel to him. With the might of his hand, God persecutes him. God tosses him about in the roar of the storm.
Job knows God will bring him to death. He knows he is headed to the house appointed for all living. Job waited for light, and darkness came. He hoped for good, and evil came.
We should observe the distinct transitions in the emotional arc here. Chapter 29 is stately, composed memory. It is orderly.
While chapter 30 is raw, present anguish, it is chaotic.
And this intentional sequence sets up the highly disciplined legal act of chapter 31. Job moves from nostalgia to despair to resolute legal action.
Chapter 31 introduces a unique genre into the text. It is a formal oath of clearance. It consists of a series of conditional self-curses. Job works systematically through categories of wrongdoing.
He states that if he has committed a specific sin, a specific punishment should fall upon him. He binds himself to these curses.
This is a recognized legal framework in the ancient Near East. Scholars like Norman Habel and David Kleins cite a direct ancient Egyptian parallel to this structure. It mirrors the negative confession found in the Book of the Dead.
Right. In that text, the deceased systematically denied a long list of specific sins before the tribunal of Osiris. The deceased would say, I have not stolen, I have not murdered, I have not told lies.
They did this while their heart was weighed on scales against the feather of Ma'at, or truth.
Job stages his own comprehensive itemized denial. He forces a hearing because he cannot get one. He uses the legal language of his culture to compel a response from the divine judge.
Job walks through the moral categories in rigorous detail. He begins with personal purity. He denies lust for a young woman. He says he made a covenant with his eyes.
He asks what his portion from God would be if he broke that covenant. He denies walking with falsehood or deceit. He asks God to weigh him in a just balance.
If his step has turned from the way, he asks that another eat what he has sown. If his heart has been enticed by a woman not his own, he asks that his wife grind for another.
He accepts severe consequences if he is found guilty. He calls his potential adultery a heinous crime. He calls it an iniquity to be punished by the judges. It is a fire that consumes to the realm of destruction.
The denial regarding the mistreatment of servants requires close attention here. Job states that if he rejected the cause of his manservant or maidservant when they brought a complaint against him, what would he do when God rises up? When God inquires, what will Job answer?
Then Job makes a specific theological argument. He asked if the one who made him in the womb did not also make his servant. Did not one God fashion them both in the womb?
This is remarkably advanced theology for the ancient Near East. In a society structured by rigid social hierarchy, Job grounds the rights of his servants directly in shared creation. The master and the slave are equal before the Creator.
It undercuts any justification for treating servants as less than human. They share the exact same origin in the womb by the same Creator.
Job recognized their legal rights to bring a complaint against him. He did not dismiss them based on their social status. He treated their cause with the gravity it deserved. He knew he would have to answer to God for how he treated them.
Job continues his list of denials. He denies withholding help from the poor. He denies causing the eyes of the widow to fail.
He denies eating his morsel alone without sharing it with the fatherless. He claims he raised the fatherless from his youth and guided the widow from his mother's womb.
He denies seeing anyone perish for lack of clothing. He denies seeing the needy without covering. He claims the loins of the poor blessed him because they were warmed with the fleece of his sheep.
He denies raising his hand against the fatherless when he saw help in the gate. If he did any of these things, he asks that his shoulder blade fall from his shoulder. He asks that his arm be broken from its socket. The self-curses are violently physical.
Job also denies trusting in wealth. He denies making gold his trust. He denies calling fine gold his confidence. He denies rejoicing because his wealth was great, or rejoicing because his hand had found much.
Next, Job focuses on the denial of astral worship. We mentioned this cultural temptation earlier. Job denies being enticed by the sun shining or by the moon walking in splendor.
He denies his heart being secretly enticed or his hand throwing a kiss to them.
This was a recurring temptation in Israelite history. The worship of the host of heaven is frequently condemned in the biblical text. Job categorizes this as an iniquity to be punished by the judges.
He states it would be a denial of the God above. Job maintains strict, uncompromising monotheism. He attributes power and worship to God alone.
Furthermore, he denies rejoicing at his enemy's destruction. He denies exulting when evil overtook his enemy or asking for his enemy's life with a curse.
He denies hiding his sin from the community, like Adam did. He did not conceal his iniquity in his bosom out of fear of the multitude.
Finally, he denies land abuse. He denies eating the yield of the land without paying the laborers or causing the owners of the land to lose their lives. If he exploited the land, he asks that thistles grow instead of wheat. He asks for foul weeds instead of barley.
The oath reaches its climax. Job utters his final wish. He wants an actual accuser. He cries out, "Oh, that I had one to hear me."
He points to his signature. He demands the Almighty answer him. He wants the written indictment that his adversary has written.
If he had that written indictment, he would not hide it. He would carry it on his shoulder. He would bind it to himself like a crown.
He would declare to God the number of his steps. He would approach God like a prince. He is not cowering in fear. He is demanding his legal rights.
This connects directly back to chapter 23. Job's frustration is entirely legal. He simply cannot find the courtroom.
He knows he's innocent. He knows the charges against him must be false. He wants to see those charges in writing. He wants to stand before the judge and present his immaculate record.
By binding himself to this rigid conditional curse framework, is Job attempting to back God into a legal corner?
He uses a binding legal formula. He has stated his innocence. He has accepted the curses if he's lying. According to the legal customs of his day, the burden of proof now shifts to the accuser. God must answer.
It creates a tension with the earlier wisdom poem. The poem asserted God's ways cannot be reasoned out or compelled by human systems. Yet Job attempts exactly that. He uses a human legal structure to compel a divine response. He builds a legal trap and steps inside it.
The narrative tension peaks with the narrator's explicit closing statement. The text simply says, "The words of Job are ended."
The formal legal demand is on the record. Job waits for a response. The friends are silent. Job is silent. The stage is set for God to appear.
Instead of God, we examine the arrival of Elihu. This covers chapters 32 through 37. He arrives abruptly. He has not been mentioned before this moment.
The text provides a detailed genealogy. He is Elihu, the son of Bereshel the Buzite, of the family of Ram.
Elihu is angry. His wrath is kindled against Job because Job justified himself rather than God. His wrath is also kindled against the three friends. They condemned Job without providing adequate answers.
Elihu says he waited to speak because he was young and they were old, but their failure compels him to speak.
Elihu introduces a substantial compositional debate among biblical scholars. He is completely absent from the prose prologue. He is completely absent from the prose epilogue. He is not listed among the friends who come to comfort Job.
He is not rebuked by God at the end of the book. Furthermore, his Hebrew vocabulary is distinct from the rest of the text. It contains numerous Aramaic influences. It feels stylistically different.
And most noticeably, the voice from the whirlwind later ignores him entirely. God speaks as if only Job and the three friends are present. Elihu vanishes as abruptly as he appears.
Scholar Carol Newsom treats this section as a later insertion by an editor. She employs a polyphonic reading of the text. She suggests the book is a collection of voices arguing different viewpoints.
In this view, a later editor found the dialogue's resolution unsatisfying. The friends failed to defend God adequately. Job appeared too victorious. So the editor inserted a new voice to provide a better defense of divine justice before God speaks.
David Kleins notes the abruptness might characterize Elihu as a brash youth rather than a later addition. Youthful arrogance might explain his sudden interruption and his lengthy, somewhat repetitive speeches.
We must treat the evidence for insertion as real. It is a serious scholarly position. But it is not absolute proof. The text we have includes Elihu. We must deal with his arguments.
Setting the compositional debate aside, we must examine Elihu's unique arguments. Elihu diverges from the friends by criticizing both sides. He tells Job his claim to pure innocence is flawed. He tells the friends their arguments were weak.
In chapter 33, he introduces a new concept. He argues that suffering is divine communication, not merely retributive punishment.
The friends argued suffering is always punishment for past sin. Elihu argues God speaks through pain on a bed. Suffering is a disciplinary warning. It is meant to keep man back from the pit. It is preventative, not just punitive.
Elihu details a mediator figure involved in this process. When a person's life draws near the grave, an angel or interpreter appears. This figure is one among 1,000.
This mediator shows a person what is right. He prays to God. He is gracious to the sufferer. He says, "Deliver him from going down into the pit. I have found a ransom."
We must contrast this with Job's mediator. In chapter 16, Job wanted a heavenly witness to argue his case against God. In chapter 19, Job wanted a redeemer to vindicate his innocence after his death. Job's mediator is a legal advocate.
Elihu's mediator is different. He's an instructor offering correction. He does not vindicate an innocent party. He facilitates repentance for a guilty party. The sufferer is restored to youth and favor because he accepts the discipline.
However, this points to a recurring pattern across the entire text. Both Job and Elihu instinctively reach for an intermediary figure to bridge the gap between human suffering and divine justice.
Elihu's concept of suffering as divine tutelage deeply resonates with restoration teachings. The idea that God uses affliction to teach and refine is central to Latter-day Saint theology.
We will note that briefly here. It sets a foundation for concepts we will explore fully in a future deep dive once the complete arc of the book is visible.
In chapters 34 through 37, Elihu defends God's justice at length. He insists God cannot act wickedly. He asks if one who hates justice could govern.
He argues God's sovereignty requires his absolute justice. If God were unjust, the universe would collapse.
Elihu transitions into describing God's power in weather. He describes thunder, he describes lightning, he describes snow falling on the earth, he describes torrential rain.
He describes the breath of God producing ice. He describes the broad waters freezing solid like metal.
He asks Job if he knows how God controls the clouds. He asks if Job can spread out the sky like a molten mirror. He demands Job stop and consider the wondrous works of God.
The imagery becomes increasingly stormy. The focus shifts entirely from human morality to divine power over the physical elements.
Regardless of authorship, these 6 chapters of weather imagery serve a distinct literary function. They prime the reader. They build anticipation. The storm is gathering.
They function as a direct literary bridge into chapter 38. That is where God actually speaks out of a literal whirlwind. The text moves seamlessly from Elihu's description of a storm to the actual voice of God in the storm.
Let us transition to our devotional closing. We want to address the themes of trust and integrity for you, the listener.
We return to Job's oath in chapter 31. Job works systematically through lust, deceit, hidden sin, and land abuse. He performs this exhausting self-examination.
He does this without any guarantee of an answer from God.
This applies directly to Latter-day Saint practice. It is easy to instrumentalize personal worthiness. We often examine ourselves with the expectation that trials will end.
We expect prayers will be answered. We expect a direct reward for our obedience. We treat it transactionally. I obey, therefore God must bless me now.
Job performs his rigorous accounting when the transactional logic is completely broken. God has not answered him. Job has lost everything. Yet he maintains his integrity independent of any visible reward.
His obedience is not contingent on his prosperity. Job's unrewarded integrity reveals the core of his character. He does not obey simply to avoid punishment. He does not obey simply to gain wealth.
He obeys because the law is right. He treats his servants well because they share a creator. He helps the widow because justice demands it. His morality is independent of his circumstances.
We connect this to Doctrine and Covenants, section 121. Joseph Smith was in Liberty Jail. He was suffering deeply. He cried out, asking where God was hiding.
He received the promise that all these things shall give experience and be for good.
We contrast this with the Friends' view of deserved suffering. The Friends would say Joseph was in jail because he had sinned. We connected briefly to Elihu's grasp of consecrated, purposeful suffering.
Elihu saw suffering as instruction. This naturally points to the grace of Jesus Christ. Christ consecrates our afflictions for our gain. He transforms meaningless pain into refining experience.
We must frame the current state of the narrative carefully. Job is proving his integrity. The book currently provides no explanation for his suffering.
God's upcoming speech will not answer Job in the way a courtroom verdict would. God does not provide a point-by-point rebuttal to chapter 31. Job wants a hearing. A hearing and an explanation are not the same thing.
Latter-day Saints believe in a God who speaks through modern revelation. We value answers. We seek clarity. Yet this book reminds us that some griefs come without attached explanations.
They come without immediate answers, even from a loving father. Integrity means standing firm before the explanation arrives. It means holding the unanswered questions without abandoning your core convictions.
Consider the silence Job endures right at this moment in the text. He has spoken his final words. He has laid out his entire life. And there is only silence before the storm arrives.
Does true moral independence require a period of divine silence to properly forge itself? If we always received immediate answers and immediate rewards, we would never develop pure integrity. We would only develop transactional obedience. We'll pick up next time with God's actual answer out of the whirlwind. Thanks for being with us.